You're listening to Innovating Tomorrow's Medicine with Dr. Jeff Trickett.
In this episode, I'm speaking with Rick Fultz, with over 20 years of leadership experience in life sciences strategy, commercialization, and ecosystem development. Prior roles include partner at First Capital Accelerator, supporting the growth of early-stage portfolio companies, and CBO of Biocom California, helping hundreds of small and mid-sized life science companies. Currently CEO at Acurion. As someone who scaled Biocom and now Acurion, what key lessons have you applied from your early leadership roles?
It takes a lot of hustle, right? There is no shortcut, even with AI. There is no substitute for hustle. You've got to get at bats with investors, hospitals, patient groups, on and on. It's all about hustle, and those who will hustle will be the winners in this race.
Can you give us your take on the landscape of AI in healthcare and why it is now the right time for Oncogaze?
You could walk into a hospital and they'll look at your eyeballs and tell if you're gonna have sepsis, right? There's all kinds of cool uses of AI. I believe that where we are, we're basically in image-based MRIs, CAT scans, X-rays, mammograms, anything where a human eye is looking at an image, AI can have a major role in improving that.
How are you partnering with academic institutions and advocacy groups to accelerate adoption and validation of Oncogaze?
We do focus a little bit more than maybe some startups do in regulatory, because right now we have a great path for our tests, but if there's some additional rigor that happens around AI tests, we need to be aware of that. And we can help shape those conversations, right? We are in some ways creating a new category here, right? Phenotypic evaluation of cancer biomarkers is somewhat a new concept.
As with all things, it's about using these tools in the right way.
I think everybody's intrigued by the use of AI, what I call a good use of AI. Evaluating complex imagery quickly to the benefit of patients, that's a pretty cool use of AI.
Rick, welcome. Thanks for being here. Let's dive straight in. Tell me about Acurion.
Acurion is transforming diagnostics in the healthcare space. We have an AI technology that can detect from standard digital images of H&E stain slides, which is the current biopsy. Unfortunately, 20 million cancer biopsies a year. We can take a digital image of that and detect immediately genomic cancer biomarkers. So changing a lot in the healthcare diagnostic paradigm using that. The current standard is time consuming, and we can now provide instant genomic insights for oncologists with our technology.
You're building Acurion during a pivotal time in precision oncology. What's your long-term vision for Oncogaze and your company's impact to cancer care?
We suspect that Oncogaze and similar technologies will be as commonplace as the biopsy itself. So for us, it's cancer. We're reading biopsies in a new way. But there will be AI in X-ray, CAT scans, MRIs that will have AI components to it. So we think we will be as commonplace as the biopsy itself will be our application on top of it.
So as someone who scaled Biocom and now Acurion, what key lessons have you applied from your early leadership roles?
It takes a lot of hustle, right? There is no shortcut, even with AI as the engine of our technology. And AI in every part of everyone's business these days, there is no substitute for hustle. So we are not unlike a lot of startups out there. You've got to hustle. You've got to get at bats with investors, hospitals, patient groups, on and on. It's all about hustle. And those who will hustle will be the winners in this race, right? There's going to be AI winners and losers. In healthcare diagnostics, we aim to be one of those winners. And it's going to take human hustle to get there.
And actually, you're implementing something at the point of care. I mean, to your point, there's so much that goes into that. You're having worked for a genetic testing company previously. It's, again, just a ton of, it takes a village.
Yeah, you can get approvals, you can get reimbursement, you can get codes. That's great. You're going to have to hustle to get implementation, right? And we know that. We're talking through that every day.
Let's move on to Oncogaze itself. So Oncogaze delivers diagnostic insights in seconds. What's the biggest technical challenges you'll overcome to make this possible?
Yes, our CSO, Ludmila Alexandrov, is our inventor. He's our genius behind the scenes here. His goal was to make this test usable by as little information as possible. So a standard image of a biopsy, no alterations needed, no additional staining. What is the most basic level of information you can use, which again, H&E stain for biopsies is used worldwide for 100 years. So that is a very easy to get bit of information. You don't need a bunch of different information on patients. So just with an image, we can now detect cancer biomarkers. That took a lot of work to get from simple H&E stain image to actually being able to detect clinically actionable biomarkers, but we have overcome that part of it. And that's through advances in microscopy, advances in AI, and advances in computational biology that allow us to do that. So we've overcome the biggest challenge, which is how can you make that leap of what would be considered genomic cancer biomarker detection, needing next generation sequencing, et cetera. How can you discern that just from an image? That's the biggest challenge that we've overcome. That wasn't possible a couple of years ago.
So how does Oncogaze achieve higher accuracy than traditional FDA-approved genomic testing? And what hidden markers is it recognizing?
There's an advisor for ours. He used to run EvoNexus here in town for Rory for a while. He told me the story of this that hit with me from day one. If you had a leak in your house and you brought a plumber over to look at the leak, would you bring them to the blueprints that are in your file cabinet, or would you bring them to the leak? That's what we're doing, okay? You have genetic code, and today's standard of care is reading your genome or reading instabilities in your genome and deducing that something is happening in your cell. That's the current standard. We can now look at the cell itself in real time and see what's happening. That's why it's more sensitive. It's a better predictive value because you're no longer deducing from some abnormalities in your genetic code that something's happening. We can see that something happening. So it's just a shift. It's phenotypic evaluation versus genotypic evaluation.
How do you balance Oncogaze's speed and affordability without compromising on clinical trust and performance?
Like I said, it's a new way of looking at it, quite frankly. So it is cheaper and quicker just by its nature. You don't have to ship tissue to a genetic sequencing lab. You can evaluate an image, which you can upload to the cloud. So speed and cost go way down because of that. But because we're looking at it differently, we're just evaluating an image at high resolution as opposed to prepping and dissecting tissue. It's just a different approach. So that's why you can do it quicker. It just so happens to be more sensitive because we're looking at it instead of deducing what's happening. So again, nothing wrong with next generation sequencing. It's incredibly valuable for a lot of things, but for real-time detection of what is the NIH now calls a phenotype, it's better to actually see the phenotype in action. Our first one is called HRD, homologous recombination deficiency, and we have a couple others that we're working on, TMB, MSI, KRAS, similar concept where you can see it in action as opposed to deducing it from genetic information. So it's that shift that allows us to be cheaper, faster, and more sensitive.
So perhaps in part expanding on that, can you give us your take on the landscape of AI in healthcare and why it is now the right time for Oncogaze?
You know, there's AI in platforms, in decision-making platforms. You could walk into a hospital and they'll look at your eyeballs and tell if you're gonna have sepsis, right? There's all kinds of cool uses of AI. I believe that where we are, we're basically in image-based use of AI on top of image-based technology. So again, MRIs, CAT scans, X-rays, mammograms, anything where a human eye is looking at an image, AI can have a major role in improving that. For an X-ray right now, a radiologist could look at an X-ray, maybe there's a way to help them using AI. What we're looking at is something that the human eye is not even tasked with doing right now. Pathologists are not tasked with finding genomic cancer biomarkers by eye. It's not possible. So the result is they've got to use this genetic sequencing, which has its challenges, right? So we think the time and place is here for the use of AI in image-based testing, and especially one where the humans aren't even tasked with doing it right now. So it's a value add, right? We're not taking radiologist jobs who evaluate X-rays. We're not taking a pathologist job. We're adding a value proposition that didn't exist. It's a good time and place for that. And again, 5 years ago, microscopes weren't there with scanners built in to capture this at this kind of granularity. AI wasn't there, you know, when we were in chat 1.0. So we're now at a perfect time and place where all microscopes can take these images. AI can now, find these things, and we're off and running.
Of course, this is not only helping the clinicians make better decisions for the patients, but again, it's getting those decisions faster for the patient as well.
These patients don't realize that this hiccup in the diagnostic process happens until they're in it. So if you get a pancreatic cancer diagnosis, you don't have much time, and you don't realize that when you get the biopsy back, an oncologist sits there and says you have stage 4 pancreatic, you think they're going to treat immediately. Well, that's not the case. The case is they have to go sequence these tumors in a lot of cases, and sometimes you wait. And for pancreatic, they don't wait. They guess, and they put them on a treatment. But for other cancers, and unfortunately, my dad went through this 2 years ago, you have cancer, bladder cancer, it's pretty bad. We just thought, okay, what's the treatment? Let's start tomorrow. You have to wait weeks for the tumor molecular profile to come back. People don't know that that's the case until, fortunately, they go through it. So that is a major pain point we're solving for. That time is critical in late stage cancers.
Moving on to the science and the clinical strategy. So as OncoGaze is published in the Journal of Clinical Oncology, no less, what is your plan for additional peer review validation or clinical trials?
That is the publication in Clinical Oncology, Journal of Clinical Oncology. So that took 1.5 years. We won't voluntarily sign up for too many more of those, but we are going through clinical review. So we're building a pancreatic cancer model. The Journal of Clinical Oncology validated our ovarian and breast cancer models. So we will do a similar one for pancreatic. There's also the FDA rigor that we're going through. So we are just starting the process of FDA approvals for breast, ovarian, and pancreatic cancer for our tests. So there's pretty straightforward pathways there, but still work to be done, right? So we're going to have to do some local validation studies in the different markets we're going to, and we don't have to do any prospective trials. So cool part of our business model, the use of AI can just be retrospective analysis of trials that have already happened. So we don't have to go run a double-blind study costing millions and millions of dollars and taking years. But there is a process there. We have to get approved if we want any real commercial traction.
Are there any plans to sort of widen this to other types of solid tumors, other types of cancer?
Yeah, so HRD is the first one where we've got thousands of samples and we're validated. And we chose that because it's clinically important for pancreatic, ovarian, triple negative breast. When you get to those bad places, the only thing that matters is HRD. But there are other biomarkers that are similarly important for prostate cancers, colon cancers, lung cancers, that we have some small data sets on that are compelling. So KRAS is a pretty well-known biomarker, MSI. Not only can we detect the presence of these biomarkers, but we can actually map to response. So for MSI, for example, it's not just the existence of MSI or MSI stable or unstable. Is it going to respond to some of the checkpoint inhibitors that are out there? That's what we can map to. So it's got to be a combination of a couple things. Does it matter, right? If you find somebody to have HER2, for example, there are some companies that can find HER2. There's a lot of ways to test for HER2. It's an earlier stage marker, so time isn't of the essence as much. So it's got to be a situation where time is of the essence. Maybe there isn't a test that effectively captures something, and it's life or death for some of these cancers. So we probably won't be detecting HER2 anytime soon. It's some of these harder to detect or more clinically necessary biomarkers that we're going after.
How are you partnering with academic institutions and advocacy groups to accelerate adoption and validation of OncoGaze?
The academic institutions are great partners. We're born out of UCSD, right? So that is our technologies out of UCSD and the Moores Cancer Center. We have gotten a lot of our samples through academic partnerships. They hold the keys to a lot of these big cohorts of patients where you've got images and sequencing data and response data. So you need hospitals and academic institutions to partner with, and we have a lot of partnerships set up. And then the groups, obviously I came from Biocom for 15 years. Policy is incredibly important. A lot of startups maybe don't fully appreciate that. I do, coming from a policy shop for 15 years. Not only staying, we got to understand what's going on with non-dilutive funding. That's a bit crazy right now. The FDA and related regulatory bodies are defining their AI-based strategies right now. So just being at the forefront of those, in those conversations, I'm lucky enough to still be connected to Biocom and similar groups where we're aware of what's going on as the FDA evaluates how they're going to handle AI tests. We want to make sure that we're in line with that. And so we do focus a little bit more than maybe some startups do in regulatory, because right now we have a great path for our tests, but if there's some additional rigor that happens around AI tests, we need to be aware of that. We can help shape those conversations, right? We are in some ways creating a new category here, right? Phenotypic evaluation of cancer biomarkers is somewhat a new concept.
You were featured on CNN's Global Innovations. What kind of response did that generate in terms of partnerships or strategic momentum?
Yeah, it got some eyeballs on us for sure. CNN was a great vehicle for us. There's some other ones in the works right now. I think everybody's intrigued by the use of AI, what I call a good use of AI, right? Some people are scared of AI, but evaluating complex imagery quickly to the benefit of patients, that's a pretty cool use of AI, right? So CNN highlighted that. We've got some additional things coming down, and it did open some eyes for investors, collaborators, et cetera, and we're chasing those.
Just expanding on that, there's a lot of discussion about sort of like AI, and to your point, there's some skepticism, but I think it's not the future, it's already here. And I think, as with all things, it's about using these tools in the right way. And so I believe I'm correct in saying that there's no drug that's been approved yet using AI, so the jury's still out.
Not approved. There's some that are now into phase 2, right? So they're getting there, right? But yeah. And again, our tool could be used for drug development and drug screening, right? We can predict response of certain biomarker or certain treatments related to certain biomarkers that hit on biomarkers. So there's definitely a play there, and there are other companies who use AI for drug development, no problem there, but we are focusing on the clinical need, right? How can we take a major pain point in cancer care, right? Which is unfortunately still growing in numbers. Pancreatic cases are up, ovarian cases are up. Despite all these incredible treatments, there's a pain point there in detection of these biomarkers. So I saw Terminator where the robots took over. I'm with you, like there are some other uses of AI that maybe aren't the best. We think this is an incredible utility for AI, is this test.
It's actually one of my favorite sort of topics of conversation. That's because what you're trying to do whether it's in drug development or getting the best treatment to the patients is, you give a treatment or a drug to one patient, it works beautifully. You give the same drug so trying to stratify your patients, and of course by using this technology, you can predict, pick up those sort of like biomarkers, then their chance of being treated successfully is that much higher.
Patients and the public, maybe they don't fully appreciate what that means, because if you're not properly stratified, the results are deadly, right? You get toxic treatments or you get ineffective treatments. And those are both death sentences for these nasty cancers that we're going after. So yeah, right now in pancreatic care, there's kind of a trial and error that happens. So you get a pancreatic cancer prognosis, they don't even approve the use of NGS testing on pancreatic cancer patients because it progresses so quickly. So they kind of guess on the treatment. Okay, we're going to give them a platinum chemotherapy, see how they respond. If they respond poorly, they weren't HRD, and it's almost too late. They've half killed them with the chemo and it's progressed, right? So it's really, but it's more humane than waiting 4 weeks, because they literally wouldn't make it, right? So it's kind of a catch-22. These oncologists are feeling that pain, and we can solve for that.
So with the seed fund launched in, I think, June early this year, how are you prioritizing the investment, the product scale-up, clinical adoption, and or geographical expansion?
It's all of those things every day, right? We're making little incremental strides in every single thing you just mentioned every day. So it's hospital partnerships, pilot programs, sample procurement. The samples are really challenging. You've got to have a large cohort of where we have an image, a corresponding sequence, and patient response data. Those are not easy to find for late stage cancers where they don't even screen them sometimes, right? So that has been the challenge historically with this company, and it's still something we deal with. We're prioritizing only 3 markets to go to market with, right? US, Korea, and Brazil. and there's very specific reasons for those markets that we could talk about. But that's why we're not going after 10 markets. Some people are like, well, this would work great in Japan. Yes, it would. It would take more money and more time. And so where we can quickly get to market, which are those three I mentioned, we're focusing our efforts. So it takes a little bit of focus, quite frankly, which I'm learning. I'm learning how to stay focused. I've got a lot of great mentors in this industry have taught me about that.
I think that's a nice problem to have, because you get your proof of concept or principle in those sort of markets, and again, you can't ignore 45% of the world's pharmaceutical market here in the US, and then it'll be that much easier to sort of like do the expand. You can look at strategic partners. In some ways, there's advantages of going with a large strategic. That's very appealing for lots of obvious reasons. But then also actually working with a local, someone who not only sort of understands the nuances, the local sort of like markets, that sort of like whole piece. So I think whichever you do, there's pros and cons. But I think it's exciting.
Yeah, and for AI, I mean, it's moving so fast. So we have patents, we have a moat of our inventor and trade secrets, and these partnerships for samples have already been procured, and we have a moat, but it's not going to last forever, right? And so if we sat here in regulatory for 5 years, we would wake up from that regulatory and be passed over commercially, right? So we have to balance that. US has some straightforward pathways, as does Korea and Brazil. We can't get hung up in the EU right now. We can't get hung up in some of these regulatory bodies that would just take a little more time. We will, right? But with traction, with commercial traction, with proof of concept.
Being European originally, you make a good point about sort of like Europe, and of course, like in terms of market or in terms of actual populations, the US and Europe, if you add up all the 27 countries, the similar sort of like total sort of like populations, but just the additional, especially when it comes to like reimbursement in Europe, it just that much more difficult. And then of course, it's not just the actual reimbursement, because you can have a drug approved, and there are, I can quote numerous examples where it's taken 2 years to get a drug actually reimbursed afterwards. So it's not just that, and of course in 2025 there's a whole heap of additional sort of like health reported outcome measurements that sort of like required as well. And then of course you've got the actual dollar or euro values, and typically it's about 50 or 60%.
Sure, and you've got data privacy laws you've got to navigate in each country. You've got local validation studies. It will happen, but not before we get a little traction first.
So what are the best channels or markets you're targeting first for commercial rollouts, and regional oncology centers or larger hospital systems?
Yeah, I mean, just by the nature of how patients aggregate to these cancer centers, it's the large cancer centers, right? And if you're looking at our medical board, we've got people from MD Anderson, Moore's Cancer, we're talking to Mayo already, Dana-Farber, a lot of the Boston-based ones. So we have some good connections already there. The major cancer centers will be the starting point. They've got the infrastructure for this to set up day one, right? So that's in the US, major cancer centers, and then trickle down from that. In Korea, where I've spent a lot of time doing work, there's only 5 major hospitals. So you're just working with those 5. I know somebody at each of those 5 pretty high places. So, and then Brazil, we're actually working with the 2 top innovative hospitals. And so we won't try to attack the entire country. We'll just work with these top 2 and get a lot of private pay and private insurance. So again, picking our battles for the first tranche here of commercial adoption, if you will.
And just digging into that in a bit more detail. So in terms of the KOL feedback, I would imagine that they're very receptive to this. So can you share a bit more insight on the feedback?
Unbelievably receptive. I'm like, I don't even bring this up too much, but the KOL recruitment for this was easy. Yeah. like Eric Weiner is the head of ASCO. He just stepped down. He does not sit on boards, medical boards at all. You could look at his disclosures. we talked to him about the utility of this, and he just volunteered to come on board. It's like, that's ridiculous. Like, we have multiple KOLs like that, where the utility of what it's solving for here compelled them to just jump on board. So of all the things I've had to navigate these first 6 months, getting some of the top KOLs in the United States anyway was not a problem, which is exciting. I mean, obviously I'm humbled by that and excited by that. But so yeah, we have some amazing KOLs that helped write a lot of the national cancer guidelines for pancreatic care, ovarian care, are on our board because they know this pain point firsthand, right? They're the ones that get this thing from pathology that says stage 4, and it's an incomplete diagnosis. Pathologists know it, oncologists know it, patients don't know it. They don't know that. When the oncology sits down with you that first time, they don't have the full picture. And that's a shame in 2025, right? And that's what we're addressing.
I think that's very cool. And, that sort of patient-centric is a term that's used a lot. But I think, none of what we do, we can't do any of it without the buy-in from the clinicians. So the fact that they were, very receptive on board, that in itself.
One of my favorite conversations in all this was with Dr. Russell Brodus. He runs UNC's, University of North Carolina's pathology. He's one of our medical advisors. I talked to him about how will this work in the pathology labs, and he said that we as pathologists are craving this. We know when we give somebody, an oncologist, a stage 4 ovarian diagnosis, that it's incomplete. We know they can't treat right away. We know they're going to call us back in 2 days and ask us to ship the tissue off to Myriad Genetics or somewhere else. And then once we ship that off, we have no idea what happens, right? We don't know if it made it there. We don't know if there was tissue quantity non-sufficient. What we do know is that they're going to have to wait a couple weeks, best case, to get their answer. So pathologists know that they're giving an incomplete result to oncology. Oncology knows they're going to have to talk to a patient and tell them to wait for, all these things are happening. Now the pathologist uploads the image, gets the HRD call back, and they're delivering a full diagnosis to oncology. And that's what they want to do. Pathologists get into this business to help people, not to ship tissue off in boxes, right? So that's the feedback we get from pathology, is that you guys are helping us to complete the diagnosis that we give. And they get money for doing it. Path labs get money for running the test. They're part of the solution, and they're not shipping tissue that's not what they got into it for. So that part of it is super cool, right? We are empowering these pathologists to do what they got into this business to do, help people.
What makes your leadership team uniquely capable of translating deep science into a company that can scale and win in the market?
We get this question a lot from why you, this sounds great, but why you guys in this battle here? When I came on board, the medical backing was incredible. The science, our CSO is one of the top cited computational biologists in the world out of UCSD. So the science was sound, the medical part was all sound, but we didn't have a commercial team. So we brought on Feng Cao, who's our COO, has gotten multiple products approved and commercialized right in this same space, right? That was a must. It's like, I'll take this job, but it's not going anywhere unless we get somebody of highest caliber at that role. So that was the first hire, was Feng. And we've got a board full of not only the medical KOLs, but some commercial leaders that have sold and scaled companies. So together, at least for the early part of the team, we've got the goods on regulatory reimbursement, the medical team, and then what it takes for early stage startups, from talking to them, you need some hustle, right? And that's why they brought me in. I clearly not for my scientific, I'm the only non-PhD on my team, and it shows in any conversation, but the hustle's there, right? That's how I built Biocom, how I built some other businesses that I ran, pure hustle. You need all of that. You need a hustler, you need the medical KOLs, you need an experienced regulatory and reimbursement person. We have that combo. So we're ready. We're ready to go.
Which strategic collaborations, research institutions, tech partners, and payers do you consider most critical in your growth roadmap?
For now, again, I talked about samples as being a major hurdle to scaling. We have an exclusive agreement with the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. They sit on the largest set of data around pancreatic cancer. So they ran something called a Know Your Tumor trial and a Precision Promise trial, thousands of late stage pancreatic cancer patients. We have an exclusive arrangement with them for all of that data. That's what's building our model right now. That's a pretty critical one. Took a while to negotiate that. It has also opened some doors with some people in the pancreatic cancer market, because that's really our primary target, right? That's our biggest market, is pancreatic cancer. So that's a big one. There's some earlier stage ones with like Mayo Clinic, like I said, and MD Anderson, some of these big healthcare systems, because they're going to be the ones that can put these into their new digital pathology platforms, right? Mayo's spending $1 billion on digital pathology. We can be one of many solutions that fit into their paradigm there. So hospital system partnerships make sense. Patient group partnerships like PanCan make sense. The academic ones are great. Obviously, UCSD is an incredible partner here. And Moore's Cancer will be a place where we, have some pilots as well. So it's kind of all of them. Again, I think on purpose, I've shied away from the big pharma partnerships. AstraZeneca, who makes a treatment related to HRD, is interested in what we're doing. But to me, it's a bandwidth and focus thing. If we're chasing all these potential, us being a platform for drug screening, I think we're doing ourselves a disservice on our clinical.
Well, it comes back to what you said earlier, focus. You can't boil the ocean. So yeah. Are there specific geographies where Oncodays could have the most immediate impact, perhaps in markets underserved by genomic testing?
There's two components to this. So in the 40% of the world that has access to next generation sequencing as a reliable second line diagnostic, right? So basically everywhere in the developed world anyway, you can get a biopsy. But only about 30 to 40% of that market can you realistically get your tumor sequenced after that. So for that 60% of the world, there is no reliable next generation sequencing. You're still getting basic chemotherapy and trial and error dosing, where you start bringing in precision medicine in a not very efficient manner. So in those parts of the world, this is not a replacement for NGS. There wasn't an alternative. So from a democratization of healthcare access to precision medicine, this is a pretty big deal for those markets. For the 40% of the world that has NGS already, we are still quicker, faster, and a better, more sensitive test. And so we will just be a replacement for that. Payers are paying $4,000 in the US for a test that takes 3 to 5 weeks and has failure rates all over the place. We're going to be a seventh of that and immediate results. So it's just two answers. One, where there's next generation sequencing, there's a huge benefit, and the infrastructure is usually in place to make that switch pretty quickly. But then the almost the more compelling part is where there is not reliable NGS. A local cancer center in the Brazilian rainforests, they have a microscope to take a biopsy and take a picture of it, and they have an internet signal. They could send us their image. They don't have sequencing. So for them, this will just be a new market, or a new something for them, right? So it's pretty cool. Two different approaches.
Some tests like HER2 or HPV screening scale globally because they used existing infrastructure, while sequencing has remained out of reach in many places. So how does Oncogaze compare, and what makes it globally scalable?
So where there is no next generation sequencing, you've got to understand in the country, what are they doing today? So so for example, in Korea, there's no really approved reference lab like a Myriad Genetics in the US. So some hospitals are kind of off-label using their research sequencers to try to detect HRD in patients. So it's like off-label that they're doing stuff. So you're introducing a kind of new system there, right? In other countries where they don't have sequencing at all available, right? So again, really remote areas, they may not have those precision therapies right online also. So there will be a little bit of work with the AstraZenecas of the world globally. If we can predict response to a PARP inhibitor, for example, can they get that PARP inhibitor? So there will actually be a little bit of policy work in some of these more remote regions to introduce the test and introduce precision oncology in some ways, right? So that's why that's a second wave for us. Investors always ask, why wouldn't you go immediately to one of these remote places? Well, there's some challenges there, right? So yeah, it's but it is scalable because cancer is everywhere, right? And microscopes that can take images are everywhere. It's 20 million biopsies a year and growing, unfortunately, right? So the need to evaluate a biopsy result is going to be there in every corner of the country.
Yeah, and actually, just thinking back to my previous life, like we ran a lot of clinical trials in Africa, for example, and so if you think about it, because of the different healthcare system, so it's an interesting place because you would see a lot of cancers that you wouldn't necessarily see in the first world, and again, because of the different sort of systems they have in place, some of these would be much more sort of like advanced. So again, I think that's another opportunity as well.
Another thing with HRD anyway, for this first biomarker, there are no geographic or age or race differences. A cell is a cell at that level. So there's no, our model won't have to change, right? Now the approach will have to change. In Africa, for example, you have to work very closely with the governments to get adoption. So again, we hope to go there soon. It's just a different set of circumstances there.
I'd like to thank our previous guest for the next question. We have this little tradition. So what was your favorite professional event you attended this year?
Coming from Biocom for 15 years, where we put on 200 events a year, I have a unique perspective on networking events in general.
You probably attended more than most as well.
Yeah, my diet has shown that. This is the road show for 15 years. This is what it looks like. At the Biocom's Global Partnering Conference is a must every year. I went for the first time as an attendee, not somebody putting it on, so that was kind of cool. Got a lot of value about that. Actually went to an immersion program at Mayo Clinic in remote Rochester, Minnesota, put on by a group called the Bullpen. I don't know if you've heard of them, but Bullpen put on this week of Meet the Mayo Clinic people. Pretty cool. Complete with a Minnesota Twins game at the end of it. You got to have some fun in there. I've been to a lot of events across the world, right? But that Mayo Clinic immersion thing was pretty cool.
So moving on to culture and team building. So when science and business priorities compete, how do you and the team decide which way to lean?
As I've referenced earlier, I was kind of brought on with this unbelievable team of academics and oncologists, and to be that business person, right? Business side of it. And there are inevitably always disagreements between that, right? Picking a path versus staying open to the possibilities of science, right? That these are the decisions you have to make. It takes a lot of trust and respect. What I learned, and again, I kind of appreciated this, but maybe not fully till I took this over, is as in awe that I am of, or humbled by these oncologists, they need us as much as we need them. And I didn't maybe fully appreciate that until we started making some decisions, some tough decisions on pathway and cutting off some potential pathways to move forward. Once we got through that, changed the name of the company in 4 weeks, right? Once we got through all that, the appreciation that they had, that we were able to get that done, was they were equally, appreciative of that as I am with their scientific impact. So as soon as I kind of felt that mutual respect, you really start to move as a company. If you can be trusting and open-mindedness helps, right? Because you have to. If you have one that's not listening to the other, you're dead.
You don't get taught this stuff in school. It kind of comes to you sort of as you go through life. But actually what I learned, more latterly, is that when you're setting your own goals, actually you don't set them in isolation. You have to set them with the other sort of stakeholders and with what their goals are, and then you sort of align together. And again, they don't teach you this stuff in school.
Nope, this is all hard knock stuff, right? And the quicker you can learn it and get through that, the better, right? So you don't die on the vine.
Yeah. So what cultural values do you instill across the leadership to keep both innovation and execution aligned?
I'm always open. Sometimes some people are like, wow, this guy's way too open and transparent with an investor, for example, as we're talking through pain points, right? But that's just been me, right? I don't know where that comes from, but open and transparent with challenges we have. What are we deciding between? I'll just be super transparent with that, with our board, with our staff, with investors. Humility. I ask stupid questions all the time, right? Like I've been married for 24 years, so I've given up trying to be right. You've got to ask questions, be humble, be open to feedback. And by doing that in practice, that becomes the culture of the team.
For those who know me, I'm a big quotes guy, so you just remind me of like Walt Whitman, be curious.
Yeah.
And I think, there's no such thing as stupid or inane questions, actually only unasked ones. So yeah, I like that.
I saw this documentary probably 25 years ago called The Journey, some like small documentary, but this guy had gone around following the Grateful Dead and selling grilled cheese sandwiches out of his VW bus. But he's tried to search for more in life. He started interviewing CEOs, and it turned into a documentary interviewing Coca-Cola CEO, UPS. The biggest thing I ever took from any movie ever was he was interviewing the Coca-Cola CEO in 1998. And the guy said that there's a correlation between asking for help and success. And there's an inverse correlation for not, right? So if you're too proud or whatever to ask the questions, you won't succeed. But if you ask them, there's an immediate correlation to success. That stuck with me forever, right? So I try to instill that in our teams, ask those questions.
So moving on to impacts and future outlook. So where do you see Acurion's greatest impacts in healthcare? Reducing diagnostic delays, cutting costs, or increasing equity in care access?
I think in the short term, it will be improving patient outcomes for, getting more people onto these precision therapies, right? Our first slide in our pitch deck is there's 100 approved precision oncology treatments, FDA approved. Less than 1 in 20 eligible patients get on those. So it's bridging that gap is where the immediate utility will be. We'll get more patients on the treatments that are already there, and that will have a ton of impact on the healthcare system, financially, but also on suffering and survival. Later, I think it will come the democratization, right? As we're worldwide and we become a real solution to introduce precision oncology into markets that can't have it because of supply chain stuff right now.
One of my favorite questions next. So how do you measure success beyond revenue, regulatory milestones, patient outcomes, and scientific validation?
When you look at the problems that exist in the world right now, you look at them, 10 years ago, there was a problem, now it's gone, right? Something has come in to solve a problem. You're like, gosh, why didn't somebody come up with that sooner? To me, that's the feeling around this. It's like 10 years from now, when x-rays, MRIs, biopsies have this kind of immediacy to the follow-up of it, we're all gonna look back and say, man, why didn't we do that sooner? Right? To me, that success here is that cancer patients who really don't know that there's this hiccup in the system, they will never know that because it won't be there. That's success, right? And again, I went through it with my dad. We didn't know we were going to go through it until we went through it. You and I may have a prostate, we have a 50-50 chance of prostate cancer at some point. If it's castrate resistant or it's some other strain, we don't even know these hiccups that exist right now until we go through and we go, wow, this shouldn't be like this. My dad was at Sloan Kettering, one of the best cancer centers in the world, and he had these challenges. Like, imagine where that's like in remote places. So that's what success would be like for us. You have mission-driven teams that end up engaging with patient groups. We've got these patient groups here in San Diego, but I've connected with a bunch of them. And when I talk to even investors who are maybe pancreatic cancer survivor, the few that are, when we talk about what we're solving for, like, wow, I went through that exact pain point, guessing, trial and error dosing, all that stuff, I've heard it dozens of times now. We could solve for all of those. So if you're talking to somebody who's a pancreatic cancer survivor, they're very lucky, quite frankly. I mean, a couple of them, I just talked to one last week, they caught it early. They're one of the 8% that caught it before stage 4. But the numbers are really bad for these patients. So if you are talking to somebody who survived, they will acknowledge it's almost pure luck that they made it through. Somebody guessed on the treatment and they got it right, and they got it just early enough, or whatever the needle that they thread there. And so they recognize the utility of this quite a bit. So patients are our best advocates.
So I know earlier you mentioned about sort of like the focus on sort of helping sort of like on the sort of late stage, but again, to your point just now, actually the earlier an intervention, so this can actually help with all cases.
Yeah, I think, again, where the biomarkers line up with treatment is what will follow. So, breast cancer and lung cancer, where there's multiple biomarkers. Right now, it would still make sense to do a multimodal genetics sequence of that because they can catch multiple biomarkers. If this kind of phenotypic evaluation gets to that point, well, then now it's a solution for localized early stage breast cancer, early lung cancer, all prostate cancer. So yeah, this could become a reflex test for everything where we're finding multiple biomarkers and same concept though. You have appropriate treatments for different biomarkers and you can just find them quicker, right? So there's a delay now for these HER2 type things, but they have time. But obviously the best case scenario is don't waste that time. Why spend 5 weeks getting a sequence of your genome if all you care about is, do you have HER2? You can see that on an image.
Actually remind me of like some of my conversations with clinicians and previous sort of colleagues. And of course, when they're capturing all of this information in the patient notes, ultimately what they care about the most is treating the patient as soon as is possible, rather than perfectly capturing all of the information, like what stage is it, stage 2A or B or whatever.
Yeah, and so there's two parts. One is the type of biomarker too. So like HER2 is a genetic biomarker. HRD is a genetic deduced phenotype. It's something happening in the cell, morphological changes, inflammation, necrosis. It's usually caused by germline mutations like BRCA1 or BRCA2, but it's a deduction to tell you what's going on in the cell. HER2 is a direct correlation. You're HER2 positive. This is what the treatment is. But the ones where it's a deduction that's happening, so that's an immediate need for us. So it depends on the condition too. I think there's incredible utility in this space. We're just happy to be a part of it.
Looking out 5-10 years, how might Oncogaze evolve? Additional biomarkers, new cancer types, integration into routine pathology workflows?
Yeah, we've kind of addressed this, right? Being routine with every biopsy. I still think there will be other solutions like liquid biopsy, right? More blood tests for certain early stage things, more advancements in multi-omics. So there's genomics companies that are, spanning the globe of omic evaluation. So again, we're phenotypically evaluating, right? Looking at images. It's all part of this of a paradigm of testing that's going to improve. I don't know that we'll take on all those things. We may not be able to detect early stage arthritis from an X-ray. I don't know that we're going that far, but that would be a pretty cool thing too. There's so much to solve in cancer that I think that will keep us quite busy. But there is quite an open spectrum of solutions out there that could, be interesting.
What keeps you personally motivated and optimistic in this mission-driven work against the backdrop of oncology's complexity?
My dad was a very simple guy, so he was overwhelmed by the cancer, the entire process. And there's millions of people that fall in that category. So for me, it's the alleviating the suffering for cancer patients. There's all kinds of other utility here, but that's a part that I just discovered by brutal force because I sat in there with him on every visit. I saw that firsthand. That is a terrifying place for cancer patients. You don't know that is waiting for you when you get a cancer diagnosis. If you get an early stage prostate or skin cancer or something, that's terrible, but there's time and there's some proven standards there that there's not a lot of uncertainty. But these later stage internal pancreatic, ovarian, stomach cancers, the ones that are harder to see, detect, treat, all that stuff, there is a world of uncertainty and suffering out there that people don't even know exists until, unfortunately, they get slammed into it. So that's motivating for me.
Perhaps building from that, but what inspired you personally to take on this mission and build Acurion?
Well, to be honest, it was Magda and Francois who are really the business founders of this, the angel funders for the most part. I had moved on from my role at Biocom 15 years, had that catch-up networking coffee with Magda, and she actually recruited me into it. And honestly, Magda Marquette was the board chair for Biocom about 10 years ago, my favorite board chair. And I acknowledge that some of the other board chairs will probably be watching your podcast, and I'm willing to take that risk. They know that she's the best one. So I would have run an ice cream shop for them, quite frankly, with her pitching it to me. So it was more the opportunity to work with Magda and Francois that really got me into it. Now, what came afterwards, meeting these clinicians, the patients, the technology has all been an incredible icing on the cake. But just the opportunity to work for one of the best people I've ever come across in this industry or in the world, Magda and Francois, was really what compelled me to the company.
As we wrap up, are there any questions or that I didn't ask that you'd like me to? Are there any closing remarks that you'd like to share?
I come back to like, what are the good applications for AI? I mean, heck, half my workload of spreadsheets and PowerPoints and stuff have AI in them now, and those are all good, right? AI in banking, AI in, whatever. To me, this feels really good. A good use of AI is for detection purposes on complex imagery that can really change people's lives immediately. So yes, it would be cool to know why my knee is aching by having AI look at an X-ray, and that's coming too. But for this purpose, which again, most people don't even fully appreciate how terrifying and troublesome the diagnostic process is for later stage cancers, this seems like the best possible use for AI. And so that's what excites me. So yeah, we're excited to touch back with you in 9 months when we're through most of the regulatory and we're into clinics, and hopefully we're following up on this with like we've hit it big and taken on the world.
Rick, thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Innovating Tomorrow's Medicine with Dr. Jeff Trickett.